I want to take you somewhere. Not far in miles, but perhaps quite a long way in understanding. We're going to walk through a story together, a slow, quiet, dreamlike kind of story about a traveler who discovers something remarkable about the nature of life itself, about the rules that govern it, about the invisible machinery that sits beneath all our days, quietly responding to us in ways we rarely notice until someone, somewhere, points them out. The story we are going to tell has a name. It's called A Cozy Hug Through Life's Great Game. So breathe with me now. In slowly through the nose. Hold it gently at the top. And let it go. There is a country that exists only at the edge of sleep. Not the place you arrive at when you are fully dreaming, and not the waking world you carry around with you during the day. Something in between. A borderland. A threshold country where the ordinary laws of things go soft at their edges, and where what is usually invisible becomes, if you are paying close attention, just barely visible. The way the stars become visible when the last of the daylight finally fades and you stop looking for them and simply allow the dark. The traveler found himself in that country one evening. He was a man of ordinary years and ordinary circumstances, neither poor nor wealthy, neither particularly happy nor particularly unhappy, but carrying the low and constant weight of a life that had never quite opened into the fullness he could sense, somewhere behind his ribcage, was possible. He had been walking, in the waking world, through a long stretch of days that felt like walking through shallow water in heavy boots. Not painful exactly, just relentless, just slow. And then between one breath and the next, the weight lifted, and he was somewhere else. The sky above him was the deepest blue he had ever seen, the blue that lives in the very last moment before full dark, when the light has gone but the sky hasn't admitted it yet. Stars were beginning, pressing through one at a time, the way candles are lit in a room before a gathering. Beneath his feet the ground was smooth and warm, lit with a very faint light from somewhere within itself, like a stone that has spent all day collecting sun and now gives it back. All around him the world stretched out in every direction, rolling and wide and dotted with things he couldn't entirely make out yet. Bridges in the distance, water somewhere, tall trees whose leaves turned silver when the rising starlight touched them. It was quiet, not the empty quiet of somewhere abandoned, the full and attentive quiet of somewhere that is listening. He stood still for a while and let the strangeness of it settle. And then he heard a voice, not from any direction, from the place just inside his own chest, where the quiet was deepest. "You've arrived," the voice said. It was warm, the way old fireplaces are warm and unhurried, the way deep rivers are unhurried. It had no gender and no age and no accent. It sounded, most of all, like something he had always known. "Where am I?" he asked. "You're on the board," the voice said. He looked down. The smooth, luminous ground beneath his feet was patterned. Faint lines, running in gentle geometries, intersecting, crossing, forming pathways and shapes that seemed to extend in every direction without end, like an enormous game laid out across a world. "A game," he said slowly. "Yes," said the voice. "But not the kind you play with dice and hope. the kind where the rules are real and learnable, and have been real and learnable for as long as there have been people to learn them. Most people live their whole lives on this board without ever understanding it as one. They move through their days like a person in a dark room, bumping into furniture, finding the door occasionally by accident, blaming the room when it's really only the darkness.
But the room isn't arbitrary.
The furniture isn't placed at random. There is an order to it, a logic. And once you learn it, the lights come on. The traveler looked out across the vast and luminous landscape. He thought about his life, about the times things had come easily, unexpectedly, almost as though they had simply been waiting for him to turn in their direction. And about the other times, the long, grinding, effortful times when nothing worked and every door was stuck and the very act of getting through a day felt like pulling a heavy cart up a wet hill. So life isn't random, he said. Life, the voice said, is responsive. There is a difference. Random means it doesn't listen. Responsive means it listens to everything. A pathway lit beneath his feet. Warm amber, steady, stretching forward into the soft dark of the board. It did not rush him. It did not insist. It simply waited. He took one step, and then another, and the game of life began to reveal itself. The first thing the traveler learned was that the board beneath his feet was made of thoughts. He noticed it gradually, the way you gradually notice the pattern of a room you've been sitting in for some time without really seeing. He had been walking along the lit pathway for a little while, listening to the hush of the place and the distant sound of water somewhere ahead, when he became aware that the ground was not fixed. It was changing, slowly, in the way that a summer sky moves between cloud and clear. The tiles beneath his feet shifted in color and density in response to something he couldn't immediately identify. When he thought about something good, a real memory, solid and warm, the kind that arrives full-formed when you aren't looking for it, the tiles turned a deep, steady gold. They felt trustworthy underfoot, firm as flagstones. When a worry slipped in, and there were worries, sitting in a queue at the back of his mind as they always were, waiting for a gap of quiet to press forward, the tiles changed. They went gray at their edges, slightly unsteady, like ground that might not hold. He stopped walking and looked down. The board responds to what I'm thinking, he said. It wasn't a question. It always has, said the voice. You simply haven't been able to see it before. Now this is something the traveler turned over carefully in his mind, the way you turn over something found in the earth to see if there's more of it below. Because if it was true, if the ground of life literally responded to the quality of his thoughts, then a great many things about his own history began to make a different kind of sense. The stretches of difficulty that had followed stretches of worry and dread. The unexpected good that had come in the rare and precious seasons when, for one reason or another, he had been genuinely at ease. The deep mind, the part of you that runs most of your life without asking permission, that governs your heartbeat and your breathing and the 10,000 small responses you make without ever consciously deciding to, that deep mind is a builder. It takes whatever it is given, and it builds accordingly. It cannot evaluate. It cannot weigh up whether the image it receives is something you want or something you fear. Both arrive in the same way. Both get built with the same faithful, tireless, indifferent industry. It means that the person who worries consistently is not simply suffering, they are, in a very real sense, building. Building the thing they fear. Not because they want to, because they cannot help what they are giving the builder to work with, and the builder cannot help what it does with what it is given. This is the first law of the board. Not a law invented by anyone. Not a law that requires belief to operate. A law like gravity, present, impersonal, operating on everyone equally. The traveler thought about the people he had known who seemed to circle the same difficulty year after year, wearing a different face each time but always arriving at the same shape of suffering.
He thought about how they talked about it.
The phrases they used, the predictions they made, in the flat, certain tone of people reporting the weather. Nothing ever goes my way. Good things don't last. I'm always the one who ends up left behind. Each phrase offered to the builder below as an instruction. Each one faithfully received. He thought about his own phrases and felt something shift quietly in his chest. Not quite discomfort, not quite relief. Recognition. So, what do I do? He asked. You begin to notice, the voice said. Not to fight your thoughts. Not to police them or punish yourself for the ones that come. But to notice what you are consistently feeding the builder. And to begin slowly, deliberately, like turning a ship rather than slamming on a brake, to feed it something else. Something chosen. Something true in the best sense. Not the small truth of the present difficult moment, but the larger truth. The truth about what is possible. The truth about what you have, even now. The truth about what this life of yours is capable of becoming. The tiles beneath his feet, which had gone briefly gray while he thought about old worries, brightened as he listened. Steadied. He breathed in the warm night air and chose, quite deliberately, one good thing. Something real and small and genuinely his. He held it in his mind the way you hold a candle, not gripping, just steadying. The ground under him turned gold.
He walked on.
The path carried him eventually into a grove. He could hear it before he could see it, a faint, musical sound, like wind chimes made of something denser than glass, something that rang with a note that lasted longer than it should have. Then the path curved, and the silver-leafed trees were all around him, their branches laced overhead into a kind of living ceiling, and from every branch, in the shifting light, hung keys. Hundreds of them. Perhaps more than hundreds. He couldn't see the far edges of the grove. The keys turned slowly on their thin threads of light, each one catching the starlight differently, some blazing warm and clean, others dim and corroded, tarnished the way metal goes when it has been left out in all weathers without care. He reached up and touched one of the bright ones. It rang, a single long, pure note that seemed to go on after it should have ended, traveling outward through the leaves of the silver trees and up into the star-scattered sky above. He held his finger on it for a moment. "What are these?" he asked. "Every door in your life," the voice said, "has a key. The doors are always there. They don't go away. They don't lock themselves against you because you're unworthy or unlucky. They wait, patiently, indefinitely. and they open for the matching key and for nothing else. The keys are made of words. The traveler lowered his hand and stood still in the quiet grove and let that land. Words. The keys were made of words. He looked up at the tarnished ones, the ones dark with neglect and misuse. And he understood before the voice said anything more what they represented, because he could feel, standing close to some of them, something he recognized from his own days. The cold, particular energy of a phrase repeated without thinking. I can't seem to get ahead. Something always goes wrong at the last minute. People like me don't get lucky that way. I've never been good with money. I always end up alone in the end. Not one-off complaints. Not frustrations vented once and released, but habitual statements, worn smooth with repetition into something that no longer felt like opinion, that felt like fact, like simply an accurate report on the nature of reality. Said in kitchens and in cars, and in the small hours when sleep wouldn't come. Said until the subconscious mind, that faithful and non-judgmental builder, received them as instructions and built accordingly. The spoken word has power that people rarely take seriously because it seems like such a small thing. Sounds made in the air. Vibrations that dissipate before they've gone 20 feet. What could that possibly do? But the spoken word lands first not in the air outside you, but in the deep mind within you. And the deep mind, as the traveler was beginning to understand, takes everything it receives as instruction. What you say about yourself, about your life, about your future, spoken with the weight of genuine feeling and consistent repetition, is not merely description. It is creation. It is planting. It is sending the builder detailed blueprints. The bright keys were made of something different, not of desperate wishing, not of the anxious please let this be true quality of someone trying to talk themselves into a belief they don't hold. They were made of the calm, steady, matter-of-fact claiming of what is true at a deeper level. Not what is visible right now in this difficult moment, but what is true in the larger sense. What is available? What is real at the level of possibility, even before it has arrived in form? Everything I need is already on its way to me. That was the quality of one of the bright keys. Not a desperate hope. A quiet, grounded knowing. The difference between the two is everything. Hope implies uncertainty. Knowing implies completion. I have more than enough. Said not when the accounts were full, but when they were not. Said as a choosing, a claiming, a refusing to accept the small truth of the difficult moment as the only truth. I am guided to the right people, the right places, at exactly the right time. The traveler held one of the bright keys in his palm. It was warm immediately, as though it had been waiting for a warm hand. It fitted perfectly in his fingers, the way a good tool fits the hand it was made for. "What do I do with it?" he asked. "You speak what you know to be the deeper truth," the voice said simply. "Not what you see in the difficult moment. What you know, what you claim. You give your words only to 3 things, and those 3 things only:
to heal, to bless,
to prosper. Everything else is either waste or damage. Use your words the way you would use a key, with intention, with care, turning only the locks you actually want opened." He closed his fingers around the key and carried it with him as he walked on through the silver grove, listening to the gentle music of all the others turning in the tree-scattered light above him, each one waiting for the hand that had the right kind of words to hold it. Beyond the grove, the landscape opened again, and the path widened, and the air had a different quality, clearer and cooler, the way air near moving water always is. He walked for a while in the pleasant openness of it, and then the path split, not into two directions, but into several. Maybe 8 or 9, maybe more, fanning out in every direction the way spokes come out of a hub, each one lit to a different degree, each one curving away at its own angle into a distance he couldn't read. He stood at the center of it and felt the particular kind of confusion that comes from having too many options and not enough information. And then he felt something in his hand. He hadn't noticed it arrive. But there it was, a compass, small and old and warm in his palm. He turned it slowly. The needle moved, considered, and settled. He looked at where it pointed. There was no north marked, no east, no west. Where the markings should have been, there was simply a small, steady flame. The compass pointed not toward a direction, but toward a feeling. And the feeling, when he aligned himself with the needle's direction, was peace.
Just that. Peace.
Not certainty. Not a map showing the whole route. Not a guarantee of what lay at the end of the path. Just a settling in his chest, a quality of rightness, a feeling less like a decision and more like recognition. The way a word you've been searching for finally surfaces, not found, exactly. Remembered. The compass pointed along one of the quieter paths. Not the widest one. Not the most obviously lit one. The one that curved to the left and disappeared around a low rise in the landscape without giving any information about where it went from there. The traveler's reasoning mind resisted immediately. The wide, well-lit path directly ahead looked more promising. It looked sensible. It looked like the kind of path a reasonable person would take after carefully evaluating the available evidence. He held the compass and felt the two impulses, the reasoned argument for the obvious path and the quiet, wordless settling that the compass indicated, and he understood that he was at the center of one of the most fundamental choices available to him on this board. There are two ways of knowing. The first is the kind we are all trained in from childhood, the gathering of evidence, the weighing of probabilities, the logical construction of conclusions from visible facts. This kind of knowing is useful. It is real. It has its place. But it is limited to what it can see. And what it can see is only what is already in front of it. It cannot know what is around the bend. It cannot factor in what is not yet visible. It cannot account for the 1,000 unseen convergences that are always happening, always arranging themselves below the surface of what is observable. The second kind of knowing comes from a different place, quieter, more immediate, less explainable. The sudden, wordless certainty that arrives without logic, without evidence, without justification. The pull towards something before you've thought it through. The knowing that is not assembled piece by piece but received whole. What old teachers used to call the inner voice. What the word itself, in its roots, means. Intuition. To be taught from within. The traveler had overridden it before. He could think of several specific occasions when the wordless knowing had been clear and he had argued himself out of it, had assembled the logical reasons for the opposite choice, had congratulated himself on his reasonableness, and had understood later, sometimes much later, what the wordless knowing had been trying to tell him. He looked at the compass. The needle held steady. The path to the left waited without impatience. He released the argument. He turned left, and the path unfolded before him with the quiet, unhurried beauty of something that has been waiting to be walked and is now, finally, being walked. Not dramatically, not with any announcement, just the gradual arrival of rightness, unfolding one step at a time, each step solid and clear, each step its own small confirmation. Some way back, visible now that he had rounded the rise and could look back across the board, the wide and obvious path had a section where the ground simply fell away. A quiet collapse, a gap that would have had no warning. If he had gone that way, trusting only what was visible, following only what was reasonable and evidenced, he would have walked straight into it. He looked at the compass once more. The flame on its face burned small and steady. He tucked it into his pocket and walked on, following peace. The sound of water grew gradually into a river, wide and slow and unhurried, its surface carrying the stars and long, broken reflections of silver and deep blue, the way rivers always carry the sky they move beneath. The traveler heard it before he saw it, and felt something ease in him at the sound, the way the sound of water at night almost always eases something, reaching back through all the years to the oldest parts of us that know what water means. There were others at the river. He saw them as he came through the last of the trees, and the bank opened up before him. Perhaps 6 or 7 people, each of them involved in their own particular relationship with the crossing. One man was wading in from the near bank, pushing hard against the current, face tight, arms working. He was making progress, but barely, and at enormous cost. His face said the effort was everything. His body was holding nothing back. A woman paced the bank a little way off, looking at the far side and back at the near side, and then at the water between, calculating. She had been calculating for some time, judging by the track her feet had worn in the soft earth. 2 people in the middle of the river had both taken hold of the reeds at the bank's edge and were holding on, suspended between here and there, unable to commit to either direction, gripping hard enough that their knuckles showed white in the starlight. And one man was floating. He was on his back, face turned up to the stars, arms slightly open, moving with the river rather than against it or across it. Moving, the traveler noticed, faster and with more ease than any of the others. Not struggling at all, simply being carried. The traveler watched for a while. Then he took off his boots and waded in. The water was cooler than the air, but not cold. The way stone is cooler than air on a summer evening. A relief, a different temperature, not an adversary. The current took him almost immediately, not violently, firmly, the way a strong and friendly hand might take your arm, not dragging, guiding. He let himself go with it. There is a thing that happens when people want something very much, which is that the wanting itself becomes a form of force, and the force works against the very thing being reached for. This is one of the stranger truths of the board, and one of the most important. because it runs counter to everything that the striving, achieving, effortful mind believes about how good things are obtained. The belief that effort equals result, that more pushing creates more progress, is not wrong about effort. Effort matters. Action matters. The river does not carry the person who refuses to get in. But there is a quality of effort that comes from trust, from the calm confidence of someone who has aligned themselves with something larger than their own personal force. And there is a quality of effort that comes from fear, from the desperate conviction that what you need will not arrive unless you personally and exhaustingly make it happen. And those two qualities produce entirely different results. Fear effort pushes upstream. It exhausts the person making it. It signals to the builder, that tireless architect below, that the situation is one of scarcity and danger. And the builder builds from that signal. Trust effort goes with the current. It does not mean lying still and doing nothing. It means moving in the direction the deeper intelligence within you indicates, without fighting the natural pace of things, without gripping so hard at outcomes that you block their arrival. The person who wants something terribly, who needs it desperately, who sends the wanting out into the world wrapped in the sharp edges of fear and lack, that person is often pushing against the very thing they want. Because the wanting, held that way, carries within it the energy of not yet having. And that energy builds more not yet having. The person who expects good, who trusts that what belongs to them by right is on its way, who moves toward it with the ease of someone who already knows the destination, that person is in the current. The traveler floated on his back in the wide, slow river and watched the stars above him and felt the current's quiet, certain insistence. He thought about the things he had fought toward in his life, the things he had gripped and strained and ached for. And he thought about the rare times when, through exhaustion or grace, he had stopped fighting and simply let go. And how often, in exactly those moments of release, the thing had found its own way to him. The far bank arrived without ceremony. It was simply there. He set his feet down in the soft earth and looked back at the river. The man who had been floating was already sitting in the grass a little way downstream, face turned up to the night sky, entirely at rest. Everyone else was still fighting the water. The landscape changed after the river. The traveler had been moving through open, luminous country, but now the path curved into a lower and older section of the board where the light was softer and the shadows settled differently, and everything had the quality of somewhere that had been holding on to something for a long time. And that was where he first saw the shadow creatures. They were not what he had expected. He had braced, somewhere in the back of his mind, for the dramatic, large shapes, sudden noise, the kind of danger that announces itself with darkness and dread. But these were quieter than that. They moved like weather, dark, drifting, formless at their edges. They floated through the landscape in no particular hurry, varying in size from small to considerable, trailing veils of shadow behind them the way low cloud trails rain. They didn't come for the traveler. They drifted toward the other people he saw in this section of the board, toward the ones who saw them coming and tightened, tensed, went rigid with the particular quality of someone bracing for impact. He watched a young man who encountered one of the medium-sized creatures stand his ground with his jaw set and his fists clenched, refusing to yield. The shadow grew with every step the young man took toward it, pulling itself taller and denser and more defined from the energy of the resistance being offered. The way of fire that is blown on gets brighter. The harder the young man pushed, the more the shadow had to feed on. Then the traveler noticed an older woman some distance further along the path. She came around a bend and found one of the creatures directly in front of her. She looked at it, just a look, clear-eyed and without the quality of someone preparing to do battle, and then she looked elsewhere. Simply moved her attention. Continued walking. Did not acknowledge the shadow as a power to be confronted, but equally did not pretend it wasn't there. Just withdrew her attention from it. Denied it the one resource it needed to sustain itself. The shadow drifted alongside her for a few seconds, as though uncertain what to do without the energy of resistance to feed on. Then it diffused. The way smoke diffuses in still air. Not dramatically, just less. And less again. And then nothing at all, and the path ahead was clear. What you fight, you feed. This is not a comfortable truth, because everything in the instinctive mind says that when something threatens, you resist it. You push back. You prove your strength by refusing to yield. And resistance can feel like dignity, and force can feel like power, and engagement can feel like courage. But what the traveler was learning, watching from his careful distance, was that these shadow creatures were not independent beings with their own power source. They ran on the energy they were given. And the most generous gift a person could give them was sustained, emotional, fearful attention. That was their food. That was what made them real and solid and immovable. Take that away, and there was nothing. The shadow had no power it had not been lent. The creature could not persist without the consciousness of the person it was attached to affirming its reality again and again with every act of resistance. The traveler straightened his shoulders, not stiffly, not as someone steeling themselves against an enemy, but easily, as someone who has remembered something useful and is now simply a bit more upright for it. He set his face toward the path ahead. Two shadows drifted toward him from either side, and he looked at neither. He looked at where he was going. He thought about something good and real. The shadows drifted by him without landing. He walked on, face forward, carried by the light rather than chased by the dark. The path led him downward. Not steeply, just the gradual, gentle descent of somewhere that has gone lower over time, the way a river carves a valley not by force but by patience. The air here was thicker and warmer and slightly heavier in the lungs, and the quality of the place was what the traveler would come to think of as old weight. He understood why almost immediately. Everyone he saw here was carrying things.
Bags, mostly.
Some slung over shoulders, some clutched to chests, some dragging behind on the ground like things that had gotten too heavy to lift. He passed close to several people and felt, without knowing quite how, the nature of what they carried. This one, the cold, smooth weight of a grudge, something that had once been sharp with hurt but had been turned over and held so many times it had worn smooth, like a stone in a river, smooth but no lighter. That one, the grinding, lowering drag of a resentment towards someone who had moved on years ago, who in all likelihood never thought of it. Another, the sour, familiar quality of an old shame, something revisited so often it had stopped hurting in the acute sense and had simply become part of the architecture of the person. The wallpaper, the furniture, the particular shape of how they moved through a room. The traveler had been walking lightly since the river. But in this valley, he felt something settle onto his own back.
Familiar.
Not surprising.
Just there.
He reached back and touched it and felt what he had been carrying for a long time without seeing it clearly. Old anger. Quiet and sealed off now, the way fire goes quiet under a lid, but still there. Still taking up the space it took up. Still costing something. Old shame. Not spectacular. Just a few things he had done or not done or said or failed to say that had been taken out and examined too many times without ever being properly put away. Old grief, held open past its natural closing, visited too often, kept alive by the returning, the way a wound heals faster when it is left alone. He stood in the valley and held them honestly for a moment, not dramatizing, not amplifying, just looking at them clearly in the way you look at something when you have finally stopped looking around it. Forgiveness is a word that is often misunderstood, and the traveler was no exception to this. He had thought of it, when he thought of it at all, as something you gave to the person who had caused the hurt. An act of generosity toward them. Almost a statement that what they had done was acceptable, or at least forgivable. And since some of what had been done was not acceptable, the idea of forgiveness had always arrived at a closed door in him. But standing here in the valley of old weight, feeling the actual physical sensation of what he had been carrying, he began to understand it differently. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to someone else. It is a gift you give yourself. The resentment, the old anger, the kept open grief, these are not hurting the person who caused them. They are not punishing them, not reaching back across the years to deliver any message. The person who caused the hurt has, in most cases, moved entirely on, lives their life, sleeps at night. The only person being hurt by the carrying is the carrier. What you hold in bitterness is not justice. It is a chain connecting the present you to the past moment of pain. It uses your present consciousness, your present creative energy, your present ability to build something new, and loops it backward, keeps it orbiting the old wound, feeding the builder with pictures of grievance and loss. And the builder builds more of what it is fed. Releasing it is not saying the harm didn't happen, not pretending, not erasing. It is simply withdrawing the living energy of now from the dead weight of then.
Cutting the chain.
Freeing what was locked in that old loop to move forward instead.
This is not quick.
The traveler knew that as he stood in the valley. It is not a single dramatic decision that resolves everything in an instant. It happens in layers, the way ice on a river melts from the outside in. The intention to release is the beginning, and the beginning matters enormously. He thought of the person whose face came first when he thought of old anger. He thought of them, and instead of holding the anger he had always held, he said to them, inside himself, with no performance and no audience, I release this. Not for you. For me. I am taking back the energy I have been giving this. It belongs to my life from here, not to that moment back there. He set the bag down. It didn't feel spectacular. It felt quiet, the way a long-held breath finally released feels quiet. Just less. A little lighter. A little more room. He set down the shame, the grief, the other old weights he had been carrying without consciously choosing to. And he walked out of the valley moving differently than he had moved in. The board had layers, and the traveler found the deeper ones by accident, or perhaps, more accurately, by the particular quality of attention that had been growing in him since he first stepped on the path. A quality of noticing, of being genuinely present to what was there rather than what he was expecting. He stopped to rest beside a wide, still pool. The water was perfectly clear and perfectly still, catching the starlight and holding it in long, steady ribbons of silver. He sat at its edge and watched his reflection, and threw his reflection into the depth below, and after a while, how long exactly, time being soft and unmeasured here, he noticed something. Movement beneath the surface. Small, luminous, purposeful. Figures, if you could call them that, working with extraordinary industry in the depths of the pool, building something, constructing from some material he couldn't entirely name, but could feel the nature of. They moved quickly and without wasted effort, these small builders, receiving something from above and making something from it below. He leaned closer. They were building the board, not repairing it, continuously constructing it, taking the material that came from somewhere above the surface, from him, he realized, from the region of him where his thoughts and feelings lived, and building the world from it in real time. Not slowly, not with delay or evaluation or any kind of filter. Just receiving and building. Whatever arrived, built. When a peaceful thought passed through him, the builders received something warm and clear and made something beautiful from it. When an old anxiety surfaced, something left over from the valley, not yet fully released, they received that too, and built from it without hesitation or preference. The deep mind is the most powerful creative force a person has access to. Not the thinking, reasoning, conscious mind, that useful and limited instrument that can only work with what it can see. The deep mind, the one that runs beneath all conscious awareness, that never sleeps, that never goes off duty, that takes every thought and feeling and image and spoken word it receives and builds, without rest and without judgment and without any capacity to decide whether the building material is something wanted. This is a fact that becomes, the more deeply you understand it, both astonishing and clarifying. Because if the deep mind builds everything it receives, if it cannot distinguish between the image of what you want and the image of what you fear, then the entire project of life becomes, quite simply, the project of choosing with more care and more consistency what you give the builders to work with. Not in the anxious, white-knuckled way of someone trying to police every thought. That doesn't work and it exhausts you. But in the steady, gardener-like way of someone who knows what they are growing and tends accordingly, who understands that what grows is what was planted, who plants with intention and weeds without drama and trusts the process of growing because they understand the process. The builders never stop. They do not go on holiday. They work in the small hours. They work during sleep. They work in the background of every distracted, ordinary, unnoticed moment of every single day. And what they build from what you give them. The traveler sat beside the still pool for a long time. He thought about what he wanted the builders to make. Not with the desperate urgency of wanting, which is really just another signal of not having. With the clear, calm quality of a person who knows what they are making and has aligned themselves with the making of it. He held the picture steadily, the way you hold a candle in a slight wind. Not gripping, just steadying. And he sent it down to the builders below the surface. He felt them receive it, and he watched them begin. Not far from the pool, the path widened into a clearing ringed with old trees, and in the clearing were 2 chests. They were the same in every way he could see, same dark wood, same iron fittings, same size, same heaviness about them. Both locked, both waiting, but above one a warmth gathered in the air, barely visible, the kind of heat haze you see above summer roads. And above the other a coolness, a slight dimming of the light. He stood between them for a moment. "What's inside them?" he asked. The voice, warm and unhurried as always, said, "Whatever you expect." The traveler thought about that for a long time. Not what he hoped for, not what he deserved, not what he had earned or worked toward, what he expected. There is a law at work here that is among the simplest and the most precise on the entire board. You receive what you genuinely, deeply, at the level below conscious thought, expect to receive. Not what you wish for, not what you pray for, if the prayer is wrapped in doubt. What you actually, truly, at the level of the body and the bones anticipate. This is different from wanting. A person can want with tremendous intensity while expecting nothing. In fact, this combination, wanting desperately, expecting nothing, is one of the most painful and one of the most common conditions on the board. The person who aches for something with their whole conscious self, but carries beneath that ache an old, settled, immovable conviction that things don't work out for people like them, that good things go to other people, that the door is never really going to open. The wanting says yes. The expectation says no. And the builder who receives the whole transmission and not just the surface builds from the dominant signal, which is nearly always the expectation. Faith, the real kind, not the performed kind, is expectation without anxiety. It is the quality of a person who has planted a seed and does not go out every morning to dig it up and check whether it has started, who does not need daily confirmation that the growing is happening, who simply knows, with the unshowy certainty of long experience, that seeds in good ground grow. That is all. Nothing more complicated than that. Seeds in good ground grow. And what makes the ground good? The quality of expectation. The deep, settled, bone-level anticipation of good. Not wishful thinking. Not magical thinking. The same quality of mind that allows a person to sit down to a meal without demanding proof that the food will nourish them, or to walk across a bridge without requiring an engineering certification before trusting it. The ordinary, daily, unremarkable faith that things work, applied consciously with intention to the specific good things you are building toward. The traveler stood in front of the warm chest. He stood there until the warmth in the air above it became something he could feel on his face. He stood there until the expectation in him, that deep and bone-level signal, had shifted from the cool, uncertain chest to this one. It took longer than a moment. Real shifts rarely happen in a moment, but it happened. He felt it settle, the way the compass settled, quietly, completely. He put his hand on the lock. It opened. Past the clearing, the path led him to a wall. Not tall, not especially dramatic. The height of about 2 men, running in both directions as far as he could see, built of something that looked like old plaster or pale clay, the color of aged paper. Nothing aggressive about it. Nothing threatening. Just a wall. In the way. But as he came close enough to read it, he understood what it was made of. Words. The whole surface of it was covered in writing. Phrases and sentences and fragments and single words, written in 100 different hands, layered over one another in places, some recent, some so old they had faded nearly to nothing. He walked slowly along it and read. It's too late for someone like me. I've always been bad with money. I don't deserve anything better than this. Nothing ever really changes. I'll probably just be alone. Good things don't happen to ordinary people. I've tried before, and it didn't work. I'm not the kind of person who gets lucky. Things always fall apart just when they're starting to go well. On and on. Sentence after sentence. Not mean. Not dramatic. Just tired. The accumulated weight of every limiting thing that had ever been said or thought or quietly believed by the people who had come before him on this board. All the small, resigned, certain phrases that sound like realism but are, in fact, building instructions. Every one of them a picture given to the builder below. Every one of them carried long enough and often enough to feel not like belief, but like fact. But a belief is not a fact. This is the crucial distinction. A belief is a thought that has been thought so many times, with enough emotional weight behind it, that it has gathered the density and the feeling of fact. It has stopped being a perspective and started being the ground you walk on. It has stopped being something you think and started being something you are. And that is the good news hidden inside the wall. Because what has been thought can be thought differently. What has been built can, with patience and intention, be rebuilt. The wall is not stone. It only looks like stone. It is made of repeated thought. And repeated thought, when it is confronted with a truth that is larger than itself, becomes something else. The traveler looked at a phrase he recognized. One that had been part of his own internal furniture for as long as he could remember. Something said to him early, absorbed without examination, carried forward as though it were simply a description of how things were. He looked at it clearly, not with anger toward whoever had first said it, not with self-pity for having believed it, just clearly. And he said, quietly, the truth that the phrase had been obscuring. That's not what's true. That's what was believed. There is a difference. Where he spoke, the wall changed. The plaster blurred, softened slightly, the way wax softens near a flame. And through the softened place, barely visible, he could see the other side. What was beyond the wall? What the wall had been blocking. He continued down it, one phrase at a time, each time speaking the larger truth, each time watching the plaster thin, not hurrying, not forcing, just speaking. The wall, in the places he had addressed, became translucent, and the light on the other side was remarkable, warm and detailed, and alive with the quality of somewhere that has always been there, that was never anywhere else, that was simply on the other side of what had been believed about it. He walked on into that light. There was a tower, alone in a wide, open field that smelled of cut grass and night air, with a single face turned out across the board, catching the starlight. And on the face of the tower, a clock. The traveler noticed the clock from a distance and moved toward it with the particular gravity that clocks generate in people who are used to measuring their lives against them. He came close enough to read it. The hands were there, both of them, moving in their slow and certain sweep. But the face was blank. No numbers. No 12 and 6 and 3 and 9. Just the hands moving through clean, unmarked space.
He stood in front of it for a long time.
A great deal of the suffering the traveler had accumulated over his years had something to do with time. Not in the sense of running out of it exactly, but in the sense of the constant, low-grade anxiety of things not happening when they were supposed to. The job that should have come sooner. The relationship that should have arrived years before it did, if it arrived at all. The health that should have returned faster. The abundance that seemed always to be pending. The sense, running beneath everything like a faint but constant hum, that he was behind. That things were taking too long. That the window was narrowing. The numberless clock said something important to that anxiety. There is a timing to things that is not set by the human clock. Not by urgency. Not by the fear of running out. Not by the cultural narrative that says results should come within certain time frames, or they will not come at all. There is a timing governed by something larger, by readiness, by convergence, by the completion of something that must complete before the next thing can begin. By factors invisible to the conscious mind and irrelevant to the conscious clock. The door that did not open in the year you needed it most was not a denial. It was a preparation. What was being built during the waiting was something you couldn't see from where you were standing. A readiness in you that had to happen before what was coming could be properly received. The relationship that didn't work out was not a failure. It was a clearing. The opportunity that fell through was, in more cases than the rational mind will accept, a protection, something better arriving precisely because the lesser thing did not. There is never really a late on the board. That is perhaps the most difficult thing on the board to truly believe, because the human experience of time is so immediate and so urgent, and the feeling of behind is so physical and so convincing. But the traveler stood before the clock with no numbers and let himself feel, just briefly, what it would be like to actually believe that everything was on time, that nothing essential had been missed, that what belonged to him by right was still coming, still in motion, still being arranged by an intelligence that had far more information than he did and was using all of it. It felt, when he held it for a moment without argument, like the most profound rest. He stood in the wide field in the night air and breathed, and let the endless quiet of the numberless clock wash through him, and let the urgency go a little. Not naively, not as someone who will never act again. As someone who has remembered that effort and urgency are different things, and that the best of what is built from the first and not the second. The garden was the most alive place on the board. He came to it around a long, slow bend in the path, and smelled it before he saw it. The dense, living, complex smell of things growing at every stage of their becoming. Then the low stone wall appeared and the gate, and through the gate the whole abundance of it. It was full of everything at once. Seeds in dark turned earth. Seedlings unfurling their first leaves with the particular fragility of very new things. Mature plants thick with growth. Old trees heavy with fruit, their branches bowing slightly under their own abundance. Flowers in colors that had no exact names. And in places, thorns sharp-leafed, difficult growth, the kind that takes over if left untended, spreading across the good soil without apology. An old man moved through the garden with the particular unhurried attention of someone who has been tending things long enough to know that nothing is speeded up by being hurried at. He looked up when the traveler came through the gate. His eyes were kind in the particular way of people who have seen a great many things and have kept their kindness through the seeing. "What grows here?" the traveler asked. The gardener looked out over his garden. "Words," he said. "Every living thing in this garden grew from something spoken." The traveler looked at the thorns. He looked at the fruit trees. He thought about what had been planted to grow each. Every word is a seed, not poetically, not as a pleasing way of saying something about the importance of communication. Actually, the words spoken with genuine feeling, with the weight of real emotion and real belief behind it, goes into the deep mind, into that rich and tireless soil, and the deep mind grows it. It cannot choose not to. It cannot evaluate whether the seed is a good one before it accepts it. It takes what arrives and grows what it has. The thorns grew from fear words. The casual, habitual, reflexively pessimistic words that people offer to the world and to the deep mind every day without realizing they are planting. "This is going to go wrong. I knew it wouldn't work. Nothing I do matters. People don't change. Good things always end." The thorns are not punishment. They are simply what grew from those seeds. The gardener is not judging. The soil is not judging. Growing is what the garden does. It grows what it is given. The fruit grew from something else. Words planted with the calm, deliberate quality of someone who knows they are planting. Words of gratitude spoken before the thing being thanked has arrived in visible form. Words of abundance spoken in the face of present lack. Words of health spoken during illness, not as denial but as claim, as the speaking of what is true at the deeper, invisible level where all visible things begin. I am thankful for the abundance that is already flowing toward me. Everything I need arrives at the right time. I am well. I am whole. I am guided. These are not magical incantations. They are not wishful thinking dressed up in the language of certainty. They are the conscious choice to speak from the larger truth rather than the smaller one. To feed the builder pictures of the harvest rather than pictures of the empty field. To plant what you actually want to grow. The traveler knelt by one of the clear, good patches of soil. He thought carefully about what he wanted to see growing in his life. He chose the words deliberately, not desperately, not anxiously, but with the calm, choosing quality of the gardener. And he pressed them into the earth with his hands and let them go. The gardener watched without comment. Above the spot where the words went in, something in the quality of the soil shifted. Barely perceptible, just slightly richer, just slightly more ready. He stood up and walked on, carrying the smell of growing things. The bridge appeared at the end of a long and open stretch of the board, spanning a gorge that dropped into soft, unfathomable dark below. The gorge was wide enough that what lay on the other side, a warm, detailed, golden landscape, near enough to see clearly but unreachably far, felt more like a description of somewhere than an actual place reachable from where he stood. He walked toward the bridge. It was pale stone, smooth and elegant, arching outward from the near bank in a curve that spoke of confidence. He stepped onto the first stone, and then he stopped, because 3 steps ahead of him the bridge ended. There was nothing beyond those 3 steps, just the gorge and the dark below. He could see the bridge from where he stood, could see it arching all the way to the far side, complete and real. But when he stood on it, it only went 3 steps ahead of where his feet were. He stepped back, looked at the bridge from the bank.
Complete. Real.
Entire. He stepped on again. 3 steps and then nothing. He stood for a long while in the middle of his 3 visible steps and understood what he was being shown. The bridge of faith reveals itself 1 step at a time. Not all at once. Not from a safe distance. Not with guarantees laid out before you like a map. 1 step at a time as the foot moves forward. The bridge is real, the whole of it from here to there, but it shows itself only to the foot that is actually moving. And this is the nature of the one quality that matters most on the entire board. Not the anxious, white-knuckled, effortful trying to believe quality of someone who needs reassurance before they'll move. The quiet, lived, embodied quality of someone who moves without requiring the whole picture first, who plants the seeds and does not dig them up to check, who boards a ship without demanding to see the far shore before the ropes are cast off, who takes the step that is available without insisting that all subsequent steps be visible before this one is taken. This is not recklessness. The traveler understood that clearly. It is not the absence of thought or care or discernment. It is action in alignment with the deeper knowing, the compass, the inner voice, the quiet certainty that has been available throughout this whole journey. Acting from that knowing, even when the reasoning mind's evidence for the action is incomplete. Because the reasoning mind's evidence is always incomplete. It always will be. It can only see what has already arrived. And the bridge, the real and actual bridge from here to the good that is already waiting on the other side, only reveals itself in the forward movement. He breathed in. He straightened his spine. He took the 4th step. The stone was there, solid and cool and completely trustworthy. He took the 5th, the 6th, each step revealing the next, none of them revealing further ahead than the foot required, all of them firm and real and utterly, completely present. He walked the bridge without looking down. He kept his eyes on the warm, golden landscape ahead. And step by step, 1 step at a time, the bridge carried him all the way to the other side. The landscape on the far side of the bridge was everything it had appeared to be from a distance. More, if anything, the warmth was real. The detail was extraordinary, grass that seemed to be each individual blade, and not just grass, trees that were each individual tree, the particular texture of bark, the specific angle of light coming through leaves, the small and private sounds of a world going about its business in the most ordinary and beautiful way. And at the center of it, in a clearing where the light gathered and pooled the way light gathers in old courtyards, a fountain. Simple stone, wide and low, a single clear stream rising from its center, arcing outward, falling back. And the water, not ordinary water, or at least not behaving in ordinary ways. It moved with an aliveness, a quality of genuine enjoyment of its own movement, catching the light in colors that water doesn't usually have, making a sound as it fell that was both the sound of water and also somehow the sound of something speaking in a language just below the threshold of words. He sat beside it. He had been walking the board for a long time, and he was not tired, which continued to surprise him, but he was still. The kind of still that comes after understanding, not the dull still of exhaustion, but the full and alive still of someone who has arrived somewhere. "Does it ever run dry?" he asked. The voice, warm as it had always been, said simply, "No." And the traveler believed it.
Not because he was told to.
Because sitting beside the fountain in the golden light of the far side of the bridge, with the journey of the board behind him and all its learning settling quietly into him the way rain settles into earth, he understood the reason. The fountain did not run dry, because the source of the fountain was not the bowl. The bowl was only a channel. What the fountain expressed came from somewhere beneath the bowl, somewhere beneath the visible structure of the thing, from a source that was not material and was not therefore subject to the laws of material things, not able to run down, not capable of giving out, not dependent on what had been taken from it before, or on what conditions surrounded it, or on whether the weather was good. This is the nature of supply, the real nature of it. What looks in the everyday world like the source of supply, the job, the account, the contact, the opportunity, the particular person or circumstance through which what you need has arrived before, those are channels, real and useful channels, and there is nothing wrong with gratitude toward them. But they are not the source. The source is something else. Something that does not run out. Something that flows in proportion, not to the size of the channel, but to the quality of the consciousness that receives it. Fear closes the channel, not because the universe punishes fear, but because fear sends the signal of lack to the builder, and the builder builds lack, builds the closed channel, builds the dried-up fountain, not because that is the truth of the supply, but because that is the instruction being received. Openness, genuine, trusting, undefended openness to the good that is always flowing, is what keeps the channel clear. The expectation of abundance does not create it from nothing. It opens the channel through which what already exists can flow. What you give freely circulates. What you clutch stops moving. The person who gives from fear of running out runs out. The person who gives from the deep knowing that the source does not run dry finds that it does not. The traveler put his hands in the fountain and let the bright water run through them. It was warm, genuinely warm, the way a living thing is warm from within, not borrowed from the sun. He held it in his cupped hands and looked at it and felt, with a clarity that he had not had before this night on the board, that this was his. That this flowing, unceasing, inexhaustible good was his by right. Not earned, not deserved in a transactional sense. His by right in the way that the air is everyone's by right, because the supply was not a reward being allocated to the worthy. It was a reality available to anyone who stopped blocking it and started expecting it. He drank. The final gate was at the edge of a long, wide field where the grass was tall and the night air smelled of something just about to change, that particular scent that comes just before dawn, when the dark is at its deepest and the light is still completely invisible, but is, somehow, imminent. The gate was plain, pale stone, set into a low wall of flowering hedge.
No guardians. No ceremony.
No elaborate architecture announcing its importance. It stood open, the way a door stands open in a house where someone has just passed through it and left it for you to follow. Above the gate, carved into the lintel in simple letters, "Welcome home." The traveler stood before it and stayed still for a moment, not because he was afraid to go through, but because he wanted to stand still here and let everything he had seen on the board complete itself in him before he moved on. He thought about the tiles that changed with his thoughts, the keys that the words made, the compass that pointed toward peace, the river that carried the person who stopped fighting, the shadow creatures that fed on resistance and dissolved in its absence, the valley of old weight and what he had set down there, the builders in the pool below the surface, the two chests that held what was expected, the wall made of old beliefs that thinned when spoken to with truth, the clock with no numbers, the garden where words grew, the bridge that appeared one step at a time, the fountain that never ran dry. Not one of these things was about being better than you are. Not one of them was about effort in the straining, forcing, pushing against the current sense. Every single thing the board had shown him was about alignment, about learning to move with the grain of life rather than against it, about understanding that the game was not designed to defeat you and never was, and that every time it had felt like defeat it was because you had been playing in a way that worked against the very laws that governed it. The game of life is not a test. It is not a punishment. It is not a competition with limited prizes. It is a system of responsive laws, operating continuously and impersonally, available to everyone, learnable by anyone who is willing to look at it clearly. The three things that govern everything the traveler understood now were simple. So simple they were easy to dismiss as too simple, to pass over looking for something more complicated and sophisticated that felt more equal to the size of the challenge of a life. But there they were. Fearless faith, the quiet, bones-deep expectation of good, not the performed, anxious, is-it-working variety, the genuine, settled, ordinary kind, the kind that plants the seed without digging it up every day to check, non-resistance, the willingness to stop feeding the shadows, to look through the appearance of the difficult thing to the one power operating beneath it, to yield, not in weakness, but in the wisdom of someone who understands that peace is not the absence of challenge, but the refusal to let challenge steal the quality of your attention. And love, the daily, practical, unglamorous choice to give what you wish to receive, to bless where you might curse, to release what has been hurting you because you understand that holding it is hurting you, To see other people as part of your good rather than competitors for it. To give freely because you have understood beside the fountain that the source does not run dry. The traveler walked through the gate. On the other side, the board was everything. Warm and detailed and alive and responsive, as it had always been, as it had been all along beneath all the days of his life, whether he could see it or not. Responding to him. Always, faithfully, consistently, impersonally responding. And now he knew what to give it. He sat down in the tall grass of the wide field and looked up at the sky, which was beginning, very faintly, at its lowest edge, to change. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt that everything was exactly as it needed to be. The voice came softly now, the way voices come in the last minutes before sleep fully arrives, when the thoughts are still there but not quite attached to anything anymore. "You've walked the whole board tonight," it said. He let the words settle in without answering them. The grass was soft, and the air was clean, and the first pale suggestion of something arriving at the horizon made the dark above it seem deeper and richer by contrast. "Everything you discovered tonight has always been true," the voice said. "None of it was invented here. None of it requires this place to be real, or this night to have been different from other nights. The laws are the laws. They operate in your waking life with the same consistency and the same faithfulness with which they operated here. They have been operating all along, in every season, in the good years and the difficult ones, in the times things worked out and the times they didn't. They were always at work. The only question was whether you were working with them or against them." The sky at the horizon was changing so slowly, it was barely a change at all. The faintest lightening of the dark. The first suggestion that the dark was not permanent. The tiles of your thoughts are real. What you hold consistently in your mind, the builder builds. Give the builder what you actually want built. The keys your words make are real. Speak what is true at the deeper level.
Heal. Bless.
Prosper. Give your words only to those 3 things. The compass of your inner knowing is real. Follow peace. Trust the quiet certainty that comes without explanation. It has more information than you do. The river is real. Let it carry you. Stop swimming upstream. What you strain toward with the force of fear you push away. What you move toward with the ease of trust you allow. The shadow creatures are real, and they dissolve without your resistance. Do not feed what you want to disappear. The valley of old weight is real, and what you set down there stays down. Forgiveness is not for anyone else. It is the return of your own energy to your own life. The builders are real. They never stop. Feed them well. The chests hold what you expect. Expect what you actually want. The wall dissolves in the face of truth. Speak the larger truth. The limiting belief is not fact. It is repeated thought. And thought can always be changed. The clock has no numbers. There is no late on this board. Trust the timing. The garden grows what is planted. Plant with intention and with faith. The bridge reveals itself one step at a time.
Move.
The path appears underfoot. The fountain never runs dry. The supply is not the channel. The supply is infinite. Open to it. The horizon had lightened again.
Not bright.
Not dawn yet. Just possible. Let these settle now. the voice said, quieter still, into the deep mind where the builders wait. They are most receptive here, at the edge of sleep. What you carry into the dark with you tonight, they will begin to build. So carry something worth building, something real, something true in the deepest sense. The game of life is not designed to defeat you. It never was. It is designed to respond to you, and now you know what to give it. The traveler lay back in the tall grass of the wide field. The sky above him was stars and the first faint suggestion of what came after stars. And he closed his eyes, and the board went quiet, and the builders went on working in the deep and patient dark, building what they had been given, which was, at last, something worth building. All was well.
All was very well.
And he slept. We come to the end of tonight's journey. I hope it found you well. I hope something in it, one of those teachings, one of those images from the board, has lodged itself somewhere useful. In the part of you that the builders work from. In the part that is always listening, even now, even as your body goes heavy and your breathing slows, and the day becomes the very distant thing it should always become at this hour. If tonight's story brought you something, a little piece, a different way of seeing, or simply the rest your body has been asking for, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. If you enjoyed your time here, it would mean the world if you left a like, and it helps other people who might need this kind of story find their way here. And then please do subscribe. Sleep beautifully.